Good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us again for Library in Your Lounge Room. Um, so, first thing I should say is that everyone involved tonight is meeting on Judge Your Own Countries, and we'd like to acknowledge any elders, past, present, or future, watching, and pay our respects, of course. That was probably the most patchy acknowledgement I have ever done in my life. But on the stethoscope, Lucy Mays and her husband, the dancing doctor, Dr. Richard Mays, both in conversation with Lucy Armstrong from Maine FM. But before we start, I do want to remind all our viewers about Library in our Lounge Room, which is our nicely zhuzhed up website. There's lots of great stuff you can access online, even if the buildings themselves of the libraries are closed. All sorts of great videos for kids, craft, story times. School holiday program will be up there in a few weeks as well. Of course, all of our e-library products, movie streaming, all that sort of great stuff. So definitely go check that out. I also want to remind people that there's a couple of other things coming up soon. So next week even, we have a whole raft of great events happening online on YouTube. We have first up on Tuesday, we're actually really lucky. We've got Dr. Heather Holst, who is the Victorian Commissioner of Residential Tenancies. She'll be talking about tenancy law, especially as it relates to life in the time of COVID. So tenancy law before, during, and after COVID. On Wednesday, we are even lucky. We have we have Arnold Zabel, who is very well respected and multi-award winning author. He's going to be giving a great big book talk for us, again in conversation with a couple of library people, and he'll be also be doing a workshop the day after, which I'm afraid is already booked out. So we are doing lots of great stuff online. I also want to remind everybody about, let me just get it up here. There it is, Life in Lockdown, the Life in Lockdown project. We are accepting videos, art, letters, pictures, photos, anything that you have done that has any sort of relation to this very interesting time in history. We're going to put together, hopefully, an exhibition and a book, one or the other, both, whatever we can manage. If you have anything like that you'd like to send us, it doesn't have to be super artistic, send it to this email address up here with the subject heading Life in Lockdown Project. So we'll be collating them over the next few weeks to months, and when we've got some more news on that, we'll put them together in something nice and pretty that everyone can share. But please, if you've got anything interesting that you would like to share, that you'd like to be recorded for history, send it to that email address with that subject heading. Now, we are very lucky to have our three people, so I'm going to pass you all across to the two Lucys and to Richard, and thank you all again for watching.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Lucy, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and how you roll?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lucy. I actually work for the library, so this is me. What do they call it? Moonlighting. But in my not so much spare time, I am also a writer, and I recently, well, not so recently now, but a couple of years ago, published this book, Beyond the Stethoscope, which is a collection of doctors' stories around themes of reclaiming hope, heart, and healing in medicine. I am also a freelance facilitator and community development and leadership practitioner, but mostly these days employed full-time at the moment at the library as the acting manager of engagement, which I love.
I bet you do. Richard, what about you? What's your story?
Yes, I'm Richard. My main role is being Lucy Mays' husband. Second to that, I'm a GP in Castlemaine, working between the hospital and clinic and our health system. And more recently, I've become a part-time dancer and dance instructor with our flash mob attendee.
Are you sure it's part-time? I feel like it's like a full-time thing on the inside, but maybe part-time expressed on the outside.
That's probably more like it, Lucy. Yep.
Yeah. Richard, we might start with you. I feel like at the moment, with COVID-19, it's probably a kind of a once in a lifetime, once in a career situation for a doctor. Can you talk us through a little bit about how you and your colleagues well, I guess, how did you prepare and how are you coping in a situation that's been incredibly unpredictable? Day to day, you're not quite sure what's going to be happening, and people are pretty stressed, pretty frightened, and I imagine that you're pretty busy. So can you talk us through a bit about that?
Yeah, I was reflecting. We're sort of hitting now 2 months of, actively being involved in caring for the community and the health system in this COVID-19 pandemic. It's really changed in many ways. From the start, there was all we were going on, what was going on in other countries, and the research and evidence, but also the experience of our colleagues in other countries, which set us up for a great deal of anxiety and fear for what we were going to meet. This coronavirus itself and what it does to the human body is something unprecedented. I know it's a word that's been thrown around a lot, but
we should have a bingo game where there's a certain number of words. So if you mention unprecedented, if you mention, oh no, there's heaps, but carry on.
My least and best favourite has been the abundance of caution. It gets thrown around.
I haven't even heard that, really.
Oh, it's very big in the news early on.
Okay. Carry on.
Look, I think, what's been incredible is the adaptivity, or how we adapted early on when we realised what needed to be put in place to prepare for what we thought was going to be worst case scenario pandemic conditions in our town and our district. And it was, very quickly met amongst all the key players in our local community and GPs, the hospital workers, nurses, all the staff involved across the network, quickly collaborated around creating new systems to adapt, new rosters for the hospital, new ways of dealing with emergencies through the hospital, and each clinic working together as well as 3 clinics. We also adapted to provide a safe place. I know each clinic had a different version of how we did that. We had initially a Macca's-like drive-through service through our car park down the back door, so that no person who is suspected of having COVID-19 would enter the building. We would dress up in our full protective gear and see them down in their cars initially, and now we've set up a little satellite clinic just down the road to separate the ill, and but also to try and continue our work. And adapting to telehealth and changing our systems that would have previously taken months, maybe years, to talk about policy and procedure changes, getting committees to sign off on things. We're getting stuff done in days, and it was, so part of that was very exciting, I've got to say. It was exhilarating to see what a group of professionals could do together, and how adaptive we were in a crisis. Alongside that, fearing the worst. And I think luckily for how things have run, we have been able to control the numbers. I remember a text I got through from a contact in Bendigo Hospital about a month and a half ago. He said, we're going to expect to see our capacity at maximum next week, be prepared. That kind of fear was there, and through the measures people have done through isolation and quarantining those that were suspected of being carriers, we've avoided that, which has been a huge relief. And but yeah, it was really on the edge stuff early, and it continues to be busy, but we're now in the so that phase was the preparing phase, and now we're in the into the containment, and now the let's see what's happening out there in the community phase. So yeah,
it's interesting, those phases, because a similar thing has happened in teaching, and I think we were all running on adrenaline initially, and like you said, that sense of needing to really make stuff happen and be creative and pull all the barriers to the side and be like, look, we can't afford to mess around. Let's just cut through and get stuff done. And we're talking a lot about what is it about that process that we need to hang on to, because it's been quite a valuable, steep and painful learning curve, but something that's actually, we don't want to lose it because it's been incredibly helpful. I have a cough. I need to cough now. Excuse me.
I think what I've witnessed in that regard, Lucy, which Richard was just touching on, is the incredible teamwork. Like, they've just pulled themselves together as an amazing team. Every facet of the healthcare system in our communities have come together, and they're communicating regularly. And what Richard doesn't share readily, but the back end is months and months of morning, noon and night meetings on top of their normal clinical load. And just the preparation has been extraordinary. So I think we can all rest assured we're in good hands. But, you know, back to that fear, even just on the home front, to give it a bit of a personal edge, we were sleeping in separate bedrooms for quite some time because we were worried that Richard would be bringing the, you know, potential germs home to our family, or that we would be potentially infecting him, in which case they'd have to close the whole clinic down. So, you know, he was kind of leaving his clothes at the door and getting, you know, almost doing a wash down before he walked through the door. So it was pretty warlike conditions. And actually, Sophie, our 15-year-old, said at one point, she said, "My God, Dad, I've never seen you so alive. Like, normally he's like a walking zombie." And he was just kind of on fire. And we're going, "Aren't you supposed to be stressed?" But of course, we realised later it was the adrenaline. But he was like, "This is what I'm trained to do. Like, I'm ready to go. This is, you know, mission." You know, it was a bit sort of all that warlike language that we hear in the media. They were sort of acting out of that impulse, as well as like the you know, the soldiers in the front lines getting, you know, loading and locking their guns almost. It was just this extraordinary energy and preparation time, which then I think you know, had a big tip-off point as things changed, which is exactly what they wanted. You know, they wanted it to the curve to drop, and they're thrilled to bits with the community response and the responsibility that everybody's showing. But the adrenaline drop, whilst you have to maintain your caution and your preparedness, is like emotionally just a roller coaster.
And I guess it's you mentioned uncertainty, and I think that's what we're also trying to do, is every day deal with uncertainty. And but to keep certainty came from consistency, and yes, that was very difficult in those early days, giving people a consistent message, because the evidence would change every day. It reminded me of when I graduated, the doubling time of medical information was about 3 years, and that's why they based our continuing professional development on a 3-year program. Currently, the doubling time of medical information, generally speaking, is 53 days. And it just seemed to be heightened during this pandemic, that our knowledge of coronavirus was changing every day. And to be seen as experts, or expected to be experts in what was going on, was very difficult to give people that confidence that we knew what we were doing, because we were dealing with new evidence, new information every day. So,
and that scientific literacy, I just know from, I think what I've probably focused on a lot is choosing the media that I engage with, and one of them has been Coronacast with Professor Norman Swan, and they were talking, I think it was today, about the fact that that data, that information, that research isn't necessarily always peer reviewed. It's not always necessarily quality research, but this information is getting out there, and sometimes the media latches onto things that aren't necessarily accurate. And so what you're often doing, I imagine, I don't know, is that you're trying to be the voice that's overcoming those other louder voices coming through the media. And so there's misinformation and there's anxiety that comes from that. And so your role as I guess a public health messenger is more important than ever before, and probably quite tiring. I'm imagining,
very much so. In the early days, I would type, you know, I'd see these threads on the kind of what are the Facebook pages that popped up, the look after your neighbour ones, and probably Castlemania as well. And all these people were saying, you know, asking questions, and then lay people giving advice. And so I was sort of like, "Richard, I think we need a healthcare voice in this." So I would be typing his answers as he spoke, you know, like comatose on the couch in the evenings. And I was sort of putting it out there, which, poor Rich, you're a bit sick of me putting your voice out there on your behalf.
No, but good. Like it needs a balancing effect. I reckon good on you. So Lucy,
Lucy's very, very better at expressing words. I even struggled to say that sentence. But,
wow, great segue to the next question. So Lucy, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your book. So you published at the end of 2018, so it's a while ago now. The times obviously have moved since then, but at the same time, the book is about doctors talking about their understanding of health and well-being, the trials and tribulations of the profession, the difficulty of how do you maintain an integrity in a system that often is working against you. And you collected these really amazing stories from this huge selection of doctors. And I feel like a lot of what you were talking about is pertinent now. How do you feel like what's been happening with COVID-19 has actually brought your book sort of, even more into the forefront of what is important?
Yeah, look, in so many ways, it's quite hard to actually pull out the specific bits, but probably the first thing I would say is that my primary focus in writing the book in the first place was finding hope, and it's in the title. And the reason for that was that it was born out of my despair and fear at watching Richard sink. So, he was struggling with burnout and exhaustion and overwhelm, and I just was watching this man who was dedicated to his profession like a vocation. He was just born to do it, loves it with a passion, and yet was so distressed and weighed down by it. And I just thought, how can, like, the profession would lose so much if he was to walk away, and yet how does he stay and protect himself and remain as the doctor that he always wanted to be, which was the wholehearted, whole human doctor who listens well, who practices deep medicine, slow medicine. And how do you sustain yourself in a system that actually wants you to be a factory worker and treat people as widgets and push them through as fast as possible? And the patients themselves, in some instances, just want the quick fix as well. They don't necessarily want the lifestyle medicine stuff necessarily, particularly, and it certainly doesn't make any money, the longer range medicine. So I was starting to imagine what burnout was, and I think burnout is like a soul death when you've got a purpose in life and you're not actually able to deliver that purpose because the system stymies you. And that's, to me, a really nice non-pathologizing way of looking at burnout, which takes away any sense of human failing, or I'm not coping because I'm not a coper, and doctors are perfectionists. You've got to be an A-type personality to get that far, and then you've got to get through a cutthroat ladder of extraordinary competition at every step of the way, where you're just being carved off and chucked on the pile if you can't hack it, and only the fittest survive, but the fittest also deny parts of their humanity to in order to survive. And then they get into actually practicing real face-to-face medicine, and without those pieces of humanity remaining, they all of a sudden find that they can't actually sustain themselves, because that's the bit that feeds them. So it's a two-way feeding. Like, it feeds quality medicine, and that's what the patients want from their healthcare practitioners. They want that kind of humanity and good listening. It's basic humanity, might be a loaded word for some, I suppose, but really it's just basic human listening and communication skills that actually carry so much of the medicine. So I just started to explore this idea where, with Richard, I could gently name for him, there's nothing wrong with you that you're not coping in this system, and how can we help you to sustain yourself in there so that you don't lose yourself, which he was, and we were losing him at the same time. And I thought, I'm sure there are other doctors who have figured this out. Surely they've got their work-life thing going on, and they can be their whole selves at work and at home. So I just thought, because I was at home with babies and needed a project, I would travel around Australia and New Zealand, as you do, and interview doctors, because I was interested and fascinated to find out why. So that's what I did, and then compiled them into the book, which has these incredible stories. But the themes are so resonant now, coming back to your question, and sorry for the sidetrack.
No, it's good. That's good.
But they, I guess stress and overwhelm and burnout were the impetus for the book, and hope was the end goal. And one of the most beautiful things for me that's come out of this time is that somebody who follows me on Twitter and who's bought my book has suddenly become this amazing champion for my book. And she puts out almost weekly updates of your daily dose from my book. So she's putting out quotes to the international medical community of threads of hope for people at this time, to sustain them at this time. So that is just like profoundly exciting to me, because that's really what I was hoping to achieve, was to just some kind of balm, some kind of solace for this profession that puts their heart and soul on their sleeve and works their absolute guts out, and that goes for the whole healthcare profession, not just doctors. But I just felt like I had to narrow it down to a particular cohort, because they are a particular kind of beast.
I think she called you a beast, Richard,
in
a good way.
In a particular setting that is complicated, the fact that they're likely to be sued for this uncertain, not black and white stuff that they do with human bodies that don't always respond in the same ways. And I think the other thing that's relevant at this time, out of the themes of my book, is what you were talking about before with the health literacy, science literacy stuff. And one of the themes that came through in my book, and probably because I attacked it as using these fluffy hippie words like heart and hope, I attracted doctors who were likely to resonate with those concepts. But I ended up with lots of doctors who were challenging the status quo, very narrow definition of body health and siloed body part health, and had, as the system does, separated mind, body, spirit, and tried to treat, the person who deals with the brain and the emotions is over there treating that part of the person, and the person who deals with the lungs does this, and the heart and the bones, and everybody's treating different bits, but of course the bodily system functions as one. And so a lot of the doctors who I interviewed have ended up incorporating much more holistic perspectives into their delivery of healthcare and medicine. And I mentioned lifestyle stuff before, but some of them were also Chinese medical practitioners or homeopathic practitioners, as well as Western medical practitioners, and we're finding ways to balance those two perspectives. But what they were finding was that the Western medical model in its purest form is selling itself out in a way and losing people in droves, because there's a huge proportion of the population who don't just want to take a pill and who don't actually trust mainstream science. And you see that in this pandemic. They don't trust the government, and they don't trust science. They're scared of vaccinations. Of course, the other side of the story is the other cohort who just want the magic bullet, the vaccination or the fix it. You fix me. I don't have anything to do with this. But anyway, sorry, I think I'm babbling. But
no, just that I think they're not necessarily opposite ends of the scale. They can work together, that Western medicine and also non-mainstream medicine. And if you're able to combine them and do it in a way that's respectful of both, but also really listening to the patient, that was a big one that came through, I think, from a lot of the stories from when I read it, that idea of really listening to the patient's story. And I feel like you modeled that in the way that you really listened to these doctors' stories, and you told those stories, and people respond to storytelling. They do. It's in our soul, it's in our limbic brain, it's part of the way we learn about the world. Yeah. Richard, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your own well-being journey, because you've obviously come from that place of being incredibly stressed at work and questioning, what am I doing? What got you through? How have you managed it?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think listening to Lucy, and as you said, what a lot of came through, a lot of the stories was that connection, our connection to the doctor that we want to be, but that connection with the people that we're caring for. And yeah, a lot of the doctors in the book, and I guess in my story, it was around, I felt disconnected because I was just trying so hard to be the best doctor that I had in my brain I could be, which was all about getting the right diagnosis and getting through as many patients through a day as possible, and not making any mistakes, and I was losing out from not really focusing on that connection and that listening and hearing that patient's story, and therefore disconnecting. What my purpose was to be that in that therapeutic role with the people I was caring for. So to get back to that, it took me and the family. My father died about the same time, and I think it really shook me around to say, "Hey, I'm on my own now in terms of my mentor," and and at the same time I was burning out, and so we moved towns to sort of recheck ourselves and reconnect. And what brought me back was realizing that's what the important thing for me is having a true connection to my work and the patients on a deeper level, and looking at the barriers that were there and starting to shift those down to practicalities of time with patients and not overbooking myself, and having time at the end of the day and space for myself. So it was more a change in attitude to the workplace, not changing the workplace more so, and then what came was to be connected. I needed to look after myself and give my space time to replenish. And all these lifestyle tips I was giving to my patients, I had to start listening to. and that was finding the joy back, and that's through sport and exercise. Started doing Qigong, traditional Chinese medicine, and I think that was all, as you said, that embedding, that intermeshing of different philosophies in medicine I've always been interested in, because I don't think mainstream general practice has all the answers at all. And so I've always explored who's in my community. Particularly, I love Castlemaine for its diverse variety of allied health professionals and different medical backgrounds, from Chinese medicine with acupuncture and Qigong through to homeopathy, naturopathy, and massage and Bowen therapy. I could go on and on and on. We've got a great network in town, and I feel that's patients feel that they've got options, and that if someone's willing to explore all those options, and they feel more supported and cared for. But for me, it was also exploring those areas for myself. So I discovered Qigong, but also discovered dancing and joy in exercise, and the thrill of joining my dance class about 4 or 5 years ago now. But that's been a huge part of my life since. And and I really encourage the people I educate in younger doctors and medical students to bring their passions forward as a priority, because it's what's going to also help you remain passionate in medicine if you're replenishing yourself.
It's kind of like nurturing your essence, and it's interesting that I'm intrigued as to why dance. And was that something? No, honestly, like, was that something before you kind of hit that wall, so to speak? That was this little kernel sort of bubbling away, or was it something you discovered through an event or an accident? Why dance?
Yeah, interesting. I come from a family where both my sisters were, and particularly my older sister was heavily involved in dance, and particularly ballet. And so I always was the dressed up in a tutu, or the
practice partner
at home. And of course, in those days, 70s, 80s, it was taboo.
Madonna.
So to be a male dancer, but I was always the crazy dancer in the dance floor through university days and school.
I fell in love with him on a dance floor.
I love that. And do you remember where and what night? What was playing?
Silver.
Talk H. I remember Talk H. Was that in South Yarra? South Yarra? Yeah. Oh my God, that was a bit of a pit. So, and what was playing? Do you remember what was playing?
Oh, tough call.
Pump Up the Jam?
Probably
some of that. But it was funny. I got into growing up, but rediscovered dance by I was heavily involved in Run the Maine, which my sister started in Castlemaine, the local fun run that raises money for the hospital. And the short story was I became the mascot, being the bird, and run bird run, and one year there was a bit of a gap between the results of the people finishing the race and the results, and we used to have a band playing, and I just started dancing as the bird to just sort of have people have a bit of a laugh. And it got caught on video and got replayed a few times. And then the next year the run was there, and then a little crowd gathered after the run around me expecting at the bird dance because it had become quite famous. And so that built on. And after a few years, my kids became teenagers, and my dancing
They'd be
was very
mortified.
I remember Sophie looking very pale in this crowd of smiles, and fortunately, I'd also met Sarah Cook, who runs Local Movement Zone, and she. I was telling her in a conversation that teenagers are embarrassed by my dance moves. I need some help. And she said, "Amazing! I was just about to start an adult dance class for your kind of dancing."
Your kind of dancing? What did she mean? Daggy dancing?
Not quite right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kind of dancing just makes people laugh.
Yeah, might have a bit of a demo, Lucy.
Well, I'm wondering if now's a good time to throw to a clip.
Maybe. Shall we? We did promise dancing tonight, and we tried live, but we couldn't get the sound quite right, so we apologise. Instead, we've got some pre-recorded footage for you.
And this video tells the whole story.
Yeah.
Makes me be quiet.
Over to you, Stuart.
Sorry, folks, I think there might have been a bit of a problem with sound, and we were a bit nervous hearing that people were commenting on that, but we're figuring that it's all about the moves. So hopefully you were singing to yourselves in your head for that one. So sorry. So Richard, I'm wondering, it's interesting that at the moment, mental health, I think, has got a really strong push, but it's at a time when a lot of what people would have done for their mental health perhaps isn't possible. So what are you doing, or also maybe what are you suggesting to people that are some really good mental health strategies in a time when, we're restricted?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been difficult. It's interesting. I think it's been again the people being creative around what we can do through digital technology. But some of the clips in there, they might have seen our Silvertops dance group that we put together, which is all about a dance class for our older generation, the less mobile.
People with wisdom.
Yeah, they've really struggled, I've got to say, because they're not as savvy with the internet and Zoom meetings and gatherings. Our dance school has had a couple of two meetings where we all got on and had a bit of a boogie in our houses, but it has been particularly hard for our silver tops. So we are looking forward to getting back together very soon, and we've had little visits of flowers, and cards and keeping in contact. But yeah, I guess yes, for me, I tried to maintain a routine of exercise and getting out into the open world, and putting together some funny dance videos with my son, and putting that online as when we could.
These two keep me going as well.
Seriously, thank God for dogs or pets in general.
I had a conspiracy theory that it wasn't a bat, it was a dog that conspired around this whole coronavirus.
To get treated well for company.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I was reflecting on life has been much simpler, and I wonder, and probably contradicting myself, but I did have a very heavy schedule of well-being exercise in terms of my qigong and dancing.
Is it a stressful regime of mental health exercise? Anxiety-inducing, perhaps?
I think what might come out of this is, I'm hoping, is that actually the simpleness of life, we can gain connection through friends and family, through the digital world more readily, and but also just connecting with nature and going for walks, and the things we could do, the simple things I need to hold on to, and also not to get. I do like the whole concept of creating a new normal, and I am looking forward to getting back into a more connection through dancing, and qigong and my other exercises, but I need to rethink the balance of having something on every day. Just being able to find that time to actually do nothing, and sit in the sun, and we talk about dogs. I love the little post about cats. They nap often. They follow the sun around during the day, and every now and then they might run through the house screaming, but that's okay.
Yeah, they do. I've got a student at school today. I've been taking my dog in to work, and it's been great. And the kids greet him every day and say good day, and it means I'm chatting more readily with them. And I had a student who plays 3 sports who is loving having no sport, like just having nothing, that she's spending time with family, and simplicity. It's the key. I'm just looking at time, and I really wanted to know about your theme that I think really resonates, which is that one about hope. I don't know if any of the listeners or watchers, I keep saying listeners because I think I'm on the radio. Viktor Frankl wrote The Man's Search for Meaning, and it's a really amazing book. And he spoke, like you, Lucy, about that element of hope being what ties life together and is the reason we keep on going. What are you feeling hopeful about at the moment?
Oh, quickly.
Yeah, you've got.
For me,
all right, you've got 6 minutes.
There were some fantastic things that came out through these last couple of months, and I really just want to acknowledge the community that we live in, and what people have done to help the health professional. We had donations of gear for our protection. We had people knocking on the door. 2 people knocked on the door with free washing machines to help us do our scrub laundry. I walked into one of my favourite cafes in town, and they said, "Oh, you're a doctor. You don't need to pay." Someone's just come in and given a massive donation for healthcare workers to have free beverages through the cafes, and lots of donations like that. And people creating masks out of nothing, face shields donated out of nothing. Oh, not out of nothing, a lot of hard work that we really appreciated. And I was in tears sometimes with the effort that people have gone to rally together to do what they could to keep our community safe. There's been a lot of talking about healthcare workers being on the front line, but I kept saying it's the community on the front line that are managing this pandemic, and so the generous spirit out there has just been overwhelming a lot of the time, and so I want to acknowledge the community for that.
That's fantastic. What about you, Lucy?
Well, I'll probably speak more about the profession more broadly. I also have been given huge hope by Richard and his story about how the community's rallied and his colleagues have come together as a team too. But when I first wrote the book, I only ever considered myself a story catcher, and I wanted to be in the background. I wanted the doctors' voices to be the story. And I thought I'd done my job. Like, I was like, here we are, here are the stories, but and these are going to change the world. And then I realized you have to actually go out and sell your work. So I had to then start finding platforms to speak about some of the themes that had come out through the stories and how meaningful they were. And so I started getting on, invited to conferences and events, and I would share these stories, and doctors in the audience would be in tears with the recognition and the relief that somebody was working towards cultural change in the profession, where that vulnerability is allowed, and where kindness is a thing, and kindness towards oneself, as you've heard from Richard's story. Then I don't think it comes naturally to stop and reflect on self-care, but also there's a lot of work done around patient safety and quality and patient-centred care, but what wasn't really being acknowledged in that work was that the major safety issue in healthcare systems is not infection and mistakes. It's actually how staff treat each other, and there's a huge amount of bullying and dehumanisation in the profession, not to mention really pretty dire mental health statistics. So there's a big group of people internationally pushing for more compassion and more kindness in healthcare systems, and that's been a really uphill battle, and I've become part of that push and very passionate about it. And all of a sudden, that's now acceptable language, and mainstream representative bodies for the profession and for healthcare cultures more broadly reaching out to those of us. I wouldn't name myself in this midst, but some of the people who I interviewed for my book, who are real pioneers in changing healthcare cultures, who are finally getting a voice and a platform and some recognition and some acknowledgement. And I've been part of the Gathering of Kindness, which is an Australian movement for bringing kindness cultures and conversations into healthcare settings, and also more recently a pandemic kindness website, which is a national tool for clinicians to bring together all the resources that have been developed around kindness. And my group, my subgroup that I'm part of, is called Love and Belonging. I mean, 3 years ago, you would just not have heard the words love and belonging in a clinical context. So I think that's super powerful and super hopeful. And like many of us who have seen beautiful silver linings at this time, I have so much hope for the profession that this is a lasting silver lining for them.
Yeah, and I would, early on in particular, I would get up in the morning and the first thing I would look at would be the Kindness Pandemic, which was a Facebook page, and just read stories of people that had posted about lovely things that had happened to them, that people had done, like what you were talking about, Richard, and setting myself up for the day with those stories in my brain rather than the dire straits that people were finding themselves in. Really, really important. Yeah. I'm just noticing we've got about a minute to go.
Is there a poem? Have we got time for a poem?
I reckon that's a great way for us to see the interview out. I reckon if we end on that poem, but I just want to say a really big thank you to you both. I think, Lucy, the stories that you brought to the community, but also Richard, the work that you do, it's incredibly important, both of you. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Lucy. Thanks for your time.
Love your work too.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
That's another interview, teachers on the front line.
Yes. Yep, yeah. I'm up for that. Yep.
Yeah, great. So I've got two poems here. They're short, don't worry, by one of the doctors who I interviewed for my book, who's also a writer and a poet, as well as a GP in New Zealand. His name's Dr. Glenn Cahoon. This first one is called Today I Don't Want to Be a Doctor. Today I do not want to be a doctor. No one is getting any better. Those who are well are sick again, and those who are sick are sicker. The dying think that they will live, and the healthy think they are dying. Someone has taken too many pills. Someone has not taken enough pills. A woman is losing her husband. A husband is losing his wife. The lame want to walk, the blind want to drive. The deaf are making too much noise. The depressed are not making enough. The asthmatics are smoking, the alcoholics are drinking, the diabetics are eating chocolate. The mad are beginning to make sense. Everyone's cholesterol is high. Disease will not listen to me, even when I shake my fist. And then poem number 2. Today, I want to be a doctor. Today, I'm happy to be a doctor. Everyone seems to be getting better. Those who were sick are not so sick, and those who were well are thriving. The healthy are grateful to be alive, and the dying are at peace with their dying. No one has taken too many pills. No one has taken too few. A woman is returning to her husband. A husband is returning to his wife. The lame accept chairs. The blind ask for dogs. The deaf are listening to music. The depressed are tapping their feet. The asthmatics have stopped smoking. The alcoholics have stopped drinking. The diabetics are eating apples. The mad are beginning to make sense. Nobody's cholesterol is high. Disease has gone weak at the knees. I expect him to make an appointment.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.